this the reading room?
Yes, I'm Saad Manzul.
And I'm Travis Howard.
This is Reading Room Talk. Thank you for pressing play. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Thank
Welcome. We have a very special guest today, a legend in the making, an author, current UPenn medical student. This is Jasmine Brown, author of Twice as Hard. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you all?
Good.
Great. Thank you for taking the time, Jasmine.
Yes, we know you're busy, just book touring and being famous and everything. So we appreciate you making the time. So usually we say take us back to med school, but you're currently in med school.
Mm-hmm.
So you have very, very right memory. So tell us, what is your toughest class or rotation, you would say right now?
So I've essentially finished clerkship year, and I was actually just took step one.
Congrats! That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
Big hurdle.
Yeah. Most difficult. I feel like clerkships were pretty difficult for me, especially in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any family in medicine, and while I had shadowed before, I didn't understand what clerkship year would be like. I thought that it would be like, okay, I'm finally done with classes. I can just be in the hospital. Then I realized like I'm actually supposed to be like working full time and being a student full time.
Yep.
And that was challenging for me, that adjustment, especially after like being at Oxford for my master's, where did the history of medicine degree, and it's just very different from a pre-med or medical curriculum. A lot more writing. I actually didn't have any tests. It was just like papers that I had to submit.
Wow.
Yeah.
It is. That is not the same as third year.
No, not at all. And so
lots of memorization,
like
little factoids. Not like that at all.
Yeah,
exactly.
The just intense, like all the studying I had to do in addition to being like low on the pedestal within the hospital system, and like having to have somebody dismiss me as opposed to me just knowing like when I can leave and feeling like I have more agency over my time.
Oh yeah, it's tough. It's like we always talk about the performance part. Like it's very theatrical. You're trying to like make it look like you're busy and make it look like it's your reading, and like they ask you to leave and you have to say no, I'm gonna stay. It's like
no, let me stay.
It's so different. It's so different than having like the autonomy of just like doing your master's and kind of doing the research yourself. It's very different. So I can imagine the transition has been a little different. So
and the shelf exams are challenging. Like it wasn't just a little bit of work here plus like these longer hours in the hospital. So I think it was difficult, like I guess because from grad school, like at Oxford, I really got to think about the balance that I want in my life, and like investing time in people. And I just realized like that's something I really want in my life. But in clerkships, I felt forced to give that up in many ways.
Absolutely.
And that was really hard. And then having to think about like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I suffering in this way? Is it really worth it?
That is the question everyone asks in med school. What am I doing?
Multiple times along the way.
Yeah, it's a regular question, and I think it was difficult because at that point I didn't have like a strong conviction in an individual specialty. Like I just felt like I like different aspects of medicine. I'll find out on clerkships. But with the early clerkships, not feeling like I could really see myself in those specialties, it felt difficult to be like, oh, I'm still working towards this thing. I'm giving up so much, but I'm not even sure if there's actually a field here that I really like.
It's funny because you'll be there, you'll like know day two, like I can't do this.
Yeah.
Then you have like 8 weeks left. It's
Yeah,
tough.
oh
It's a
my
tough,
God, yeah,
tough
it's so
realization.
true, man. Yeah, you know, I feel like you're always adjusting. You're always trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Right.
You know, like as you said, you didn't have anyone in medicine to kind of give you like the real deal. You know, they don't describe it in such a way where you think you have to be in the hospital for 8, 12 hours a day and then go home and study.
They
They don't
forget to
tell
tell
you
you that
that.
part. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't. And so when you realize you have to, maybe after the first shelf,
Yeah.
it's you have a major shelf under your belt and you didn't do as well as you wanted to, so you're like,
Right.
well, I mean, maybe by the third or fourth clerkship you have it down where you can adjust, you've adjusted and you figured it out. I think that's another unspoken quality or characteristic a student has to have when they're going through, and I don't think enough credit is given to those who are able to do that well.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
And I
So
definitely agree. It's like something that's not really spoken about. Like a lot of people struggle with those exams. Like at my school, I've heard as high as like 30% of the class have to retake at least one
yeah,
exam.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
yeah, that's a lot.
No.
Yeah.
And that's an Ivy League school.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And people don't speak about it, so then it's like, wait, I should be adjusting to this faster. Like, why am I not doing well enough? Like, is there something wrong with me?
Hmm,
Um,
hmm. No, that's
So true. It's
it's
great
tough.
insight.
It's
It
tough.
is. And
A lot.
yeah.
It really is a
yeah.
lot. So, but
But
well,
I think
tell
hearing
us.
you say that and hearing us talk about it for any listeners, I think you realize that it's okay and you're
Yeah.
normal. So I'm very happy that you're able to talk and give that perspective that Saad and I may have forgot. We were a little bit older.
Nah, you're in the mix. She's in the mix right now. In the mix.
Yes, she is.
Exactly.
Yes, she is.
But I think like when you talk to other people, like it just feels good to know that like other people went through it, and
Yeah.
it's a normal feeling, and you can get through it, and it's just important to like feel like you're not the only person going through it, even though
Yeah.
people act like
Exactly.
they're not. Like everyone's going through it.
Very performative. Yeah.
Very, very.
Yes.
It's yeah. It's like you should get like an Oscar at the end of med school.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
True, it's true. But take us back. So tell us, where are you from? Where's your family from? And where'd you grow up?
So I'm from New Jersey. That's where I grew up. My
Mhm.
family, my dad's from New York. My mom is from Missouri. And that's actually, I went to WashU for undergrad.
Oh, shout out.
Yeah. So,
Very
yeah.
cool. Very cool. And did you grow up in Jersey?
Yeah, I grew up in Jersey.
So tell us, what part of
Oh,
Jersey you grow up and how was it there?
I'm from Central New Jersey, which I know is a controversial, like some people say that doesn't really exist, but I'm
Yeah,
going to say it's real.
yeah.
And well, okay, I partially grew up in Indiana and then moved to New Jersey when I was like young, so I
Got
guess
it.
both. But
But you're claiming Jersey though.
yeah, I claim Jersey.
yeah.
I feel like it fits my personality. Like I like to travel. I like
Yeah.
lots of different cities close by. I like taking trains as opposed to driving. So this
Yeah.
is more my vibe.
You're not a flatlands person.
Yeah, I don't know if I even thought about that like flat.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, so I'm from the flatlands as well. It's
Yes.
like even here on the East Coast, it's nice to be able to drive to a beach. Like where I grew up
Yes.
in Illinois, like you'd have to like fly 3 hours to like get to a beach. So that's cool. Plus, I like. So tell us about your community. Was it diverse? Were there a lot of African Americans? Was it a mix? What would you say?
Um, it's funny. So my high school never revealed the like demographic breakdown. So I always thought it was small. And then I went to WashU and then I realized it was bigger than I thought.
Yeah. I
um,
was, I was gonna ask you about that transition.
Yes.
yeah. So I would say my high school probably had around 10% black students.
Yeah.
But it was a difficult, or I would say not even before high school. Like I had so predominantly white neighborhoods or like schools,
Hmm.
and had classmates even like in elementary school telling me that they didn't think I would be able to do well in school or in a STEM like sciences because I'm Black and Black people are stupid.
Wow.
Wait. You had people tell you that, and this was 1990 what?
It was probably the early 2000s.
Early 2000s. Wow.
Yeah,
Mm.
but it's like
Yeah,
other
you
This
know.
people
just
just
happened.
yeah, telling me that. I still remember like one of them was like we were maybe in gym class. It was like volleyball, and then this girl was telling me this. But yeah, so
How did that
having
make you feel? Like, how did
Yeah,
you
how'd you
kind of respond to that?
respond?
Yeah.
I don't remember how I responded actually. Like I don't know if I really said much. I think that so something that I learned in college actually was that I would like proactively silence myself in those types of
Mm,
situations because I didn't want to be labeled as the angry, loud Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
yeah.
and I started at WashU in 2014, a few months after Michael Brown was killed. And
Oh,
so there
yeah.
was a lot of discussion around police brutality, Black Lives Matter, a lot of like protests on my campus and nearby. And that really gave me the space to realize like that how I was had this stereotype threat and slowly trying to overcome that and find my voice and not be afraid to speak up when people hurt me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
while
That
I
makes
don't
sense.
yeah. So I don't
And
remember exactly what I said, but just based off that, I probably didn't say that much. But I, for a long time, felt like I had to prove myself and I had to like do really well in school to prove that all these things people were saying were wrong and that like Black people are smart and are capable.
Twice as
And I
hard.
was, yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Um,
Twice as hard, the title.
and,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until I got the Rhodes Scholarship actually in my last year at college where I felt like I could let go of that weight. Like I felt like one, these these hateful messages that people bring to me are illogical in the first place. So like I can't counter it with logical evidence.
I
But
love
Great
that.
two,
point. Mm-hmm.
like if the Rhodes Scholarship isn't good enough to prove that like nothing will, so I might as well like let go of that and stop being so hard on myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, like, I think, and as you like kind of, like kind of have more experiences, you just start to realize that like just making it to WashU, that's a huge accomplishment. Like not
Yeah,
like the Rhodes Scholarship or even making it to college. It's all people have different starting points, and the fact
yeah,
that you started in Jersey and made it out there and middle of the Ferguson situation. I mean, that's awesome. That's awesome. Awesome accomplishment already, just to like make it down there and like survive and be able to like stay in school. Like those
mm-hmm,
are like major accomplishments. So
yeah.
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 And it sounds like you found your voice, Jasmine. How did you do that?
Yes.
I think it was just reflection. Like I remember one protest that was happening at like with some of my classmates in our like cafeteria at WashU, and it was like
Wow.
a people kind of laid down as if they were dead. Um, and I don't know, I was just thinking about it like if it's okay for them to speak up about how they feel, um, and these like like justifiably painful and traumatic experiences,
Hmm.
why can't I?
Yeah.
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 Makes sense. It makes sense. It is contagious,
Yeah,
and well, that's great. I'm glad you were able to do that.
And you had like a true like college experience, like not just education, like academic wise. Like it sounds like it was, I mean, you were in the middle of all of that. And
yeah.
that was motivating, it sounds like, for you too. So, now were you interested in medicine like when you went to WashU, or did it kind of just come about?
Yeah, I was interested. So when I was in high school, I felt like I needed to know what I would major in college. And so I was thinking about things that I find interesting. And I actually was drawn to psychology because I wanted to understand why we are the way that we are as
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
And at the time, I wasn't able to take psychology classes in my school. So then I found like OpenCourseWare online and started taking psychology courses there.
Nice. Very
And
cool.
yeah, and I really enjoyed those. Sometimes I would just be taking random courses, like I just enjoyed learning. I don't like tests,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
learning new things are cool. Um,
Yeah.
No,
but
that makes sense.
there was one professor that introduced neuroscience as an intersection of psychology and biology, and I always enjoyed and thrived in my science classes, and so it felt like a really good fit for me. Some point later in high school, I found out about the Brain Bee, which is this neuroscience competition for high school students.
Oh, please tell us. Yes.
Yeah, it's an international competition. They have like local competitions in various cities throughout the US, and then there's the national and international. And so I did that my senior year in high school, and I really loved it. It was great connecting with other students interested in neuroscience and then meeting graduate students and faculty. And that's how I actually got introduced to research. There
Hmm.
was graduate students encouraging me to get involved in research and telling me that that was actually something that I could do, which I didn't realize. And so I started getting involved, and I did a like research internship in Miami the summer after my senior year in high school, and that got me more involved in neuroscience. And um, I think with that heavy science interest and always liking to be around people and caring for people,
Hmm.
medicine like made sense to me. So I went into WashU, actually a double major in neuroscience and painting, because I also had this artistic side.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Oh, that's really cool. Oh, that's
Yeah. Um, but the studios, the art studios, and then the science labs didn't really complement each other. So I ended up actually dropping the art major and
yeah.
just doing neuroscience. But
Hmm.
um, that's
But
what
art,
kind of led me
art you
to
can always do though, which is awesome.
exactly. And this
Yeah.
book was felt like a way for me to really express and tap into my creativity. So it was a really fun project in that
Oh,
sense.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So you kind of mentioned it before.
Yeah.
So tell us about applying to the for the Rhodes Scholarship and being awarded that.
Yeah, so for Rhodes, I had a mentor who encouraged me.
Oh, please shout them out.
I her name is Robin Hadley.
Hmm.
She is currently reading at UVA, I think.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, but basically, like I had studied abroad in China my sophomore year, and I really enjoyed that experience. Um, and I think the combo of like the international connection plus advocacy work that I was doing, which kind of came out of experiencing prejudice in the lab. Um,
Yes.
that I think those things, some I don't know, whatever it was, she was like, "You should think about this program." And I didn't know much about it, and I was like, "I don't know about 2 years off, like that doesn't really fit in my plan."
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, like, and I think for a while, I actually like because I had studied abroad in China my sophomore year, and then every summer I was participating in research. I
Hmm.
knew that I would have to take at least 1 year off, and initially that felt almost like a failure, to not be following what
They
I
do
thought was
make you
the
feel
right
like
path.
that. Yes, they do make you feel like that, but it's not true.
Yeah, but I'm so grateful that that ended up happening because I didn't know how big of a deal or how like great of a opportunity the Rhodes Scholarship was, but
Mhm.
through her encouragement, I eventually decided to look into it. And I was just really inspired by the current scholars. I
Yeah.
felt like from learning a bit about their background and work that they did, that I could grow as a person by being in that community. And I also still loved I felt like I grew so much already from being abroad, and I did want to explore international fellowships for that time off or
Yeah.
time. in between undergrad and medical school. So it seemed like a good fit, and I was really excited when I got the opportunity. But I guess in terms of the application process, first you submit application to your school, and then they decide if they will nominate you. Then you submit the application to the Rhodes Trust, the organization, and they evaluate the application, select finalists, and then the finalists, we're broken up into different districts based on either where we're from or where we go to school. We can choose one of those two.
Yeah.
And then we have the interview. And so my interview, my district is based off of WashU. So I actually had my interview in Chicago. You mentioned Illinois.
Yes.
And yeah, and then after my interview, it's like first day, it's like a 2-part thing. So day 1 is like a cocktail party type thing. And then day 2, you have interviews, and then they tell you at the end of the day, like who they selected.
I see. Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's so you've been through many application processes.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So tell us, how did you feel when they told you that you were going to be awarded?
I was in shock. Like each stage, I was surprised that I was selected. Like that my school endorsed me, and then that I was a finalist. I think I just had this perception of Rhodes Scholars on like this high pedestal and something that I didn't see myself that like level.
I see.
And so, yeah, I was shocked, and it wasn't until they let me call my family when it really like set in, like, oh,
yeah,
it was me.
Yeah. Oh, that's
and
awesome.
yeah, it was amazing. Like I felt like I was on cloud 9 for a couple of weeks after that, and still was surprised because I still didn't fully grasp like how like highly regarded the scholarship is. Like I was on all these like newspapers, like I was in the New York Times, like I was on some like TV shows and stuff, and I was just like, what? Like I wasn't expecting all that.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, I'm kind of a private person.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the experience was really incredible. So I'm really
grateful. It sounds like you're very process oriented, which kind of probably kept you focused and not worried about like what you may or may not get it, or like what it actually was. Almost like an advantage to like not know how big of a deal it was.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, well, that's awesome though. So tell us about your time. Where did you go, and what did you do? You kind of alluded to the master's program.
Yeah, so the Rhodes Scholarship, they fund studies at Oxford. And initially, because I had been on that MD PhD track, my first plan was to do a DPhil in neuroscience there, which is the UK version of a PhD.
Gotcha.
And I think after learning about the number of weeks off that PhD students had there versus graduate students in top courses, that was kind of what led me to think beyond neuroscience, because while I wasn't expecting to get the scholarship, once I did, the things that I was really excited about was getting to know the community and traveling. And so having only a few weeks off in the year didn't align with that. Like I was used to an undergrad schedule where you have like summer, you have like a winter break.
Yeah, you're always doing something with that time, so it makes sense.
Yeah. So then I found out about this history of medicine, or the full title is like History of Science, Medicine, and Technology. And because in undergrad I had gotten really involved in advocacy work around trying to increase diversity and like research careers, that seemed like a good fit for me because I didn't understand why this prejudice in the research medicine field was so prevalent. But I had many friends, Black and Latinx, who could talk about like prejudice that they had in those environments. And so I felt by doing this degree, I could get to the historical roots of that prejudice.
Absolutely.
Better understand what was going on around me. And as I was starting to do that research for my dissertation, I realized that there was limited literature looking at the intersection of physicians who are both Black and female. And so that seemed like a good fit for me since I'm a Black woman. So interested in
Perfect fit.
pursuing
Exactly.
medicine.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So in a way, your research has probably inspired you um, more than you would have anticipated.
For sure. I actually had never met a Black woman physician before I did this project.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Tell us about that. Who have you met,
Yeah.
and who has made impressions in your life?
Yes.
So the first intros, which wasn't like in person, but just learning about these women through oral history, some of the earlier Black women physicians, I read about in the beginning of my book, being in my dorm room at Oxford and listening to this interview with Dr. Machen, who was a physician. She was born in 1896, I believe, and she was in medical school in the 1920s. And she was just speaking about her life, and it felt like she was. So her voice just felt very familiar, like the tenor of it, almost as if like she was my grandmother or something. And
Oh
I
yeah.
could almost imagine us like sitting across the room from each other and her telling me about her life. And so those earlier, like getting access to those archives of women from the turn of the 20th century was really meaningful for me.
Absolutely.
But then also meeting some women in person, like I interviewed a few women that were involved in NMA, the National Medical Association, which is
Shout out.
National
Yes.
Organization for Black Physicians, which I learned in my research came about because the American Medical Association, which is now for all physicians, initially would not allow Black physicians
Yep.
into
It
the
wasn't at the time.
organization.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Wow.
NMA was formed, and it continues to be this great community to uplift Black physicians. And one of the physicians that I was interviewing, she invited me to go to the conference. It wasn't the national NMA conference. It was like the NMA's conference in conjunction with the Congressional Black Caucus, actually in DC.
Yeah.
Um, then I did that while I was in grad school at Oxford, and it was so awesome, like being in this room filled with Black physicians.
Yes.
That was a really amazing and uplifting
Yeah.
experience for me.
Just the history in that room. I'm sure you could feel it, like the things
Yeah.
people went through, their stories, their journeys to like just make it to that point. It's it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that's awesome that you were able to kind of feel that, and that kind of sounds like that kind of continued to motivate you.
Yeah, I felt really privileged to be able to have this dedicated time to focus on this topic compared to an undergrad where I was balancing school, like pre-med classes, like neuroscience research. And so this advocacy work was whatever I could fit in on the side. Versus at Oxford, where this was literally what I was studying. I was allowed to invest as much time in it that I wanted to, and just felt so inspired by these women's stories. Like initially, before I was able to find out about individual women, I just was learning about all the barriers that have existed for the past 150 plus years, and even learning on a global scale how these like tools of oppression have been implemented in other countries, for instance in South Africa during apartheid.
Yeah.
And so when I was first learning about that, it felt really discouraging, like wow, this goes back even farther than I thought. But once I learned about individual physicians and their full life journey, it made me feel like, okay, well, there are these barriers that exist, and many of which that I could really relate to, like some of them speaking about how people told them that they were only in the school because of affirmative action. They weren't actually good enough, or
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
they had these handicaps because they're Black and they're women. And so being able to see those obstacles that I resonated with, but then to still see them overcome and have really successful and impactful careers in medicine, it encouraged me. And actually, we were talking about the challenges with clerkship year and adjusting to that.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple times where, like, can I actually do this? Like, can I get through this?
Mm-hmm.
And by that point, I had finished the manuscript for the book, and we were working on production phase of like coming up with the book cover. And once we had settled on the book cover, which is this a Black woman
Yes.
in a white coat, there were multiple times where I would look at that picture and it would remind me of the woman in my book and all the other Black physicians that I have learned about since then, and just be like, okay, like, this is really hard, but I
Right.
just felt like they were giving me that strength. Like, I can get through this.
Yeah, you're able to frame it. You're able to frame it like based on like what other people have been through and like how much tougher
Exactly.
it was for them, and that's important because that kind of gives you the motivation to just keep going. And
Yeah.
sometimes
It's
that's
true.
that's what med school is about. Just keep going, just don't stop. You might
And
not.
that's
Yeah, go ahead.
no. I'm listening. You might not. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was gonna say you might not like be the best at every rotation or every
Mhm.
class or every like step, but like the big thing is you just keep going.
Yeah.
That's the
You
biggest
do. You
thing.
do.
So.
You have to, and I think you've tapped into something, Jasmine, with just being able to stand on the shoulders of those that have gone before you, and using them. You have to learn about them. You have to know about them first, and that's a
Mhm.
Yeah.
huge deficit that I think you've helped so many that you probably will never meet cross that bridge and know of folks that look like them, have similar backgrounds, and who have made it. And I think it's just a wonderful thing that you've done. So yeah, tapping into that, the ancestors, it's that's a great way to keep going.
It is, it is. And I was gonna say, I feel like, you probably are able to like relate to a lot of them. And I know that you probably definitely relate to Dr. Dorothy Farabee, who's also an AKA. So
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit about her story?
Yeah, Dr. Farabee. It was really cool. So it was cool that there's a couple physicians in there who are a part of the Divine Nine, a few AKs, a few Deltas.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't intentional, like, oh, I need to find somebody who's also Greek, but it was cool to see that kind of come out and see that connection. So Dr. Farabee,
Mm-hmm.
um, she was initially, I forget which state she was born in, but it was somewhere in the South. And
Correct.
they
Yeah.
moved her up north to Boston with her aunt, presumably to give her this opportunity to pursue medicine, because even at a young age she was interested in medicine. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, at that time they were not allowing any Black people to enter medical school
Mm-hmm.
in the South besides Meharry, which
Yeah.
is the historically Black college. And
And
so
and I was gonna say, like you mentioned this before, but the Flexner report's also important for people in the history. Like it closed a lot of, African American medical schools at the time when it was published. So
yeah.
it's important that like to realize that people did to make it to med school. Like there were more med schools at one point that were African American, but a lot of them were shut down. At the time of this report that came out. So it sounds like her family sent her up north, basically.
Yeah, they sent her to Boston, and so she ended up going to medical school at Tufts University.
Mm-hmm.
And there were four other women. They were white, but they really bonded with each other because of the intense sexism that they experienced at their school, with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of professors not really acknowledging them or giving them the same opportunities as their male counterparts,
Yeah.
and even not giving them the same clinical experiences, which is something that I would like took for granted with being in medical school now. I just assume like all medical students will get the experience in internal medicine and general surgery.
It's just
But
funny.
for
I was gonna say like that's what the Flexing report was about, to standardize stuff. But then when she
yeah,
gets in, it's like not standardized. It's so messed up.
yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, the women medical students, you all can be in the foot soaking clinic. Like
Exactly.
I'm like, oh, this is different. But
Mm-hmm.
they teamed up with each other, created a study group, and really worked to overcome that gap in knowledge that their professors weren't teaching them. And Dr. Farabee actually graduated #1 in her medical school class.
Get it, Dr.
And I'm sure the gap was huge because they would not give her #1 if it was like a questionable #1.
No, exactly. Like she earned that. But
Right.
still, residency programs rejected her, saying, "Oh, her application wasn't good enough."
Hmm.
But then all her like white male classmates were accepted into residency programs months before her, and she
Yeah.
had to get help from her brother to suggest that she moved to DC, and look into a program there. This was through like I think like the National Hospital,
Yeah.
um, but there was a written test which she did well on, but then an oral test, and the male judges were like, "We want these spots for our son, so like we're
Yeah.
not gonna let you in."
Which
Um,
is completely, it hasn't completely died yet. That whole
yeah,
nepotism
that
No, heck no.
nepotism.
Oh,
has
yeah.
not died.
It's
It's still
still
alive
alive.
and well.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but thankfully he introduced her to a professor at Howard University. And so then she ended up going to residency at Freedman's Hospital
Uh-huh.
that's affiliated with Howard.
Yeah.
Um, and she had been involved in advocacy work even from as a resident, working to create child aftercare services for Black kids, as at the time none of the like daycare programs in DC would accept Black children.
Right. Right.
She worked with the sorority Alpha Kappa Alpha to create and lead the Mississippi Health Project, which was the first U.S. mobile health clinic
Hmm.
in the U.S. And
Yeah, that's a
which,
funny story too. Like you said, I feel like can you kind of tell that story about how it became a mobile clinic? It wasn't supposed to be.
yeah, so this group of women, presumably all or many of them being sorors, they went down to Virginia and, or not Virginia,
Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Hmm.
Um, and at first they were actually gonna take the train down, but the person that they would buy the tickets from said like he's not gonna sell that many tickets to Black people. So they went
Terrible.
down with a caravan of cars, and their goal was to provide care for Black sharecroppers. But then when they went there, the white plantation owners were not a fan of these Black women trying to provide health care to their workers, and initially said no. With some wooing, they said, okay, you can set up some clinics. But then they told the Black people working on the plantation, like, you can't leave this plantation. You have to keep working.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so there was no one that showed up to their clinic. And when they found out what had happened, then they said, like, okay, well, we'll bring it to them. And so then they packed up all their supplies and went plantation to plantation, providing care for the Black people in that
Innovation.
area.
Exactly. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. And shout out that train person for not giving them tickets because they're
Yeah.
able to go down with their cars and create the mobile clinic. So
Yeah.
thank you. Oh, it's awesome. That's a great story. And there's so many great stories throughout the book. We encourage everybody to get it. And
Yes.
I actually think you should rename it 20 times as hard.
Yeah, it's hard to really quantify like the
Yeah.
challenges, and there so it was like a combo with deciding on the title of,
Hmm.
for one, this is something that's like commonly said in the Black community of like you have to
Absolutely.
work twice as hard to get half as much. And there's research showing that if you have two applicants with the same resume, one has a Black sounding name, one has a white sounding name, the person with the white sounding name is going to get the job much more often.
Hmm.
um, but then
Yeah.
it was on top of that like a play of the intersection of being both female and
Yeah.
Black.
No, it's a
um,
perfect title. It's a perfect title.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
but it's interesting, like I think early on it's very clear this dynamic challenges that come with being both a woman and Black in the space. But something that surprised me, I didn't realize until I entered medical school, is how that's been changing in the past few decades. And learning about some medical school classes where there could be 10, 20 Black students, only like one or two of them are men.
Yeah.
Um, and then finding out with some of the AAMC data that I was looking at of how in the around the 1960s with the civil rights movement, every minority group and white women all increased in their representation of number of students entering medical school except for Black men, and that for them it plateaued. And then by the 1970s, because of the difference in slope of like the number of Black women entering medicine compared to the number of Black men, Black women actually outpaced them. And
Yes, very true. And
yeah,
I've
you
seen
see
that.
it like when you go to NMA, when you go to SNMA, when you like just look at like class rosters, you can see it.
yeah. And so it's really dynamic. Like my hypothesis for that shift was around the same time there was like the introduction of mass incarceration and this
Hmm.
For
preschool
sure.
to prison pipeline, which disproportionately affects Black boys, Black men. Something actually in Dr. Farabee's story, there was what led her to create the childcare after school program for Black kids was when she was a resident, she got a call from a police department saying they arrested this little boy, this Black boy, and he said that he knew her. And it turned out that
Wow.
his mom had to leave for work, and the babysitter, which was like one of the other women in the neighborhood, was sick that day, and so she wasn't able to babysit him. And he was maybe like 2 3 years old, and then his baby brother was maybe like less than 1 years old.
Mm.
Hmm.
um, so then he just had to stay home and look after his brother, and they didn't have any food in the
Hmm.
fridge, and his baby brother was screaming, crying because he was hungry. And
Hmm.
so he sees the milkman come across the neighborhood, drop off some milk at one of his neighbor's stores, and he's like, well, my brother is hungry. Let me get this milk. And he goes
Yeah.
across the street to get the milk for his little brother. This police officer sees him and takes him to the station. And he didn't even
3 years old. Wow.
yeah, he didn't even let him go get his infant brother. So his little
Wow.
brother is like left there in the hospital by himself. Um, but so thankfully, this little boy knew Dr. Farabee, and so she
Very
came
lucky.
down. Yeah, she came down to the station, like something that recognized of like the privilege and social capital that
Yes.
physicians are given in our society. That if she was just a Black woman with a job that doesn't have that same power, really, she might not have been able to advocate for him in the same way and get him out. But she's like, I'm gonna give you these few quarters that cost that one milk carton, and you're gonna let go of this little boy. Um, and so she took him home and stayed with the two kids until their mom was able to get home. And she just recognized like this disparity of, if like the parents are working hard doing what they can to provide for their kids, but if they don't have a large enough social network to help
Right.
with the raising of the kids, then they can be put in these environments where of course you're going to try to get food and milk for your baby brother, like that's
Correct.
not
Listen.
malicious. But then
No.
Right.
because he's a Black kid, he's not treated and given the same grace as other kids.
Yeah, that would not have
So
happened
true.
to a not Black kid.
People, oh no. I mean, the people who are historically oppressed and who cannot advance and achieve basic necessities,
Yeah.
yeah, things will happen.
Mhm.
And there's
Yeah.
a system of mass incarceration that and privatized and ready to make money based on that alone. So, yeah, I think that decline. There's actually a decline in graduating African American male
Mm.
physicians.
Yeah. Because
Absolutely.
imagine if that little boy like did not have that advocate and he had the potential to become a physician, but now
Right.
he's in the prison system because he was
Right.
trying to get milk for his baby brother.
Exactly. No, it's sad. It's very sad, but very important to talk about and very
Yeah.
important to acknowledge. Like this is like Black men it's not like they're just like dumber or don't want to go to medical school. It's just they don't, the opportunities just are not there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, but no, those are great stories, and we appreciate you making the time for us. I mean, this has been great. And again, we encourage everyone to buy the book. And since you're still in med school right now, we'd like you to what would you tell someone who's struggling in med school and undergrad, trying to make it? What would you tell them to help them get through?
I would encourage them as soon as they feel like they're struggling to reach out for help. There's no shame in that. And I think a lot of people may feel like, oh, if they need to reach out to their professor, if they need to get a tutor, there's something wrong with them. But something that I learned in my high school, when I was the only Black student and having other people in those AP classes, that these other students are having tutors to get ahead.
Yep.
But people are then feeling like made to feel ashamed to get a tutor because they might be getting behind. It's like there's no shame in that. Like that's kind of a cheat code that people have that they don't talk about.
Exactly.
Advance.
The hidden curriculum people don't talk about. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It's all part of it.
And so reach out for help, tap into your community, people who will support you and remind you of who you are, even in those moments that you may not see yourself. That's why we're really encouraging that you can do it one step at a time.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Awesome advice.
Yes. If I could, Jasmine, I have to take one moment to acknowledge the fact that you talked about Dr. Marilyn Gaston. I was a Gaston scholar at University of Cincinnati.
Oh,
and I met
that's
her.
awesome.
And I just think it's wonderful and serendipitous that you wrote about her, we're talking, and her impact is just it's going on and on. So I love that.
That's so awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I got to speak to her on the phone a couple months ago and tell her basically, like, it was difficult at first to get in contact with her prior to the book coming out, but as it was starting to get more traction, some people, actually, I think it was a former NMA president, he found out about my book and sent it to a couple people, and she was on the email list, and I'm like, wait, I was like, oh, Dr. Gaston, like, were you involved in sickle cell research?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, that's me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, can I talk to you on the phone? Like, I want to tell you something. And it was so special, us getting to talk. She also is a SOAR. She's an honorary AKA.
Very cool.
And just, it was really awesome being able to share with her that, like, honoring her with my book and just to be able to, like, actually connect with her as a person. So yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, I love it. It's great. It's great to feel like you're part of a community. So that's awesome. And I think that's what your book is doing. It's making everyone feel like they're part of the same community. So it's awesome. Yes. We appreciate you. We appreciate everyone for listening, and thank you guys so much. Until next time, stay low and keep firing.
Keep firing. Please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you get your pods.
I probably will take a neuroradiology elective. So we'll see if I'm surprised. I really like neuroradiology, like the imaging that I saw when I was on neurology.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting. I think, like, there's going to be an interesting intersection between actual neuroscience and neuroradiology and functional MRI and all that. So I think you never know. You might be joining the dark side. You never know.
You might. I mean,